August 17, 1943, Luftwaffe Fighter Command Headquarters, Döberitz, near Berlin. 1647 hours. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland stood before the operations map, watching red markers track returning American bomber formations as they struggled back toward England. His staff plotted confirmed kills as reports flooded in from fighter groups across Germany: 20 B-17s destroyed over Schweinfurt, 15 more over Regensburg, additional kills during the withdrawal. The numbers climbed steadily as afternoon faded to evening. Final tally, Oberst? Galland addressed his operations officer, Oberst Josef Schmid, who was coordinating damage assessments from multiple Jagdgeschwader. 61 heavy bombers confirmed destroyed, General, an additional 38 probables or damaged. American formation strength was approximately 376 aircraft. Loss rate exceeds 16% confirmed, potentially 25% including probables. This represents their highest single-day loss of the war. Galland nodded with grim satisfaction, studying the raid track. The Americans had attempted simultaneous deep penetration raids, Regensburg and Schweinfurt, both critical industrial targets. Both raids had succeeded in reaching their objectives despite fierce defensive opposition, but the cost had been catastrophic. 16% losses sustained, Galland observed. At this attrition rate, the American daylight bombing campaign is unsustainable. No air force can absorb such casualties continuously. They will either abandon daylight operations or reduce penetration depth to remain within fighter escort range. His assessment reflected professional confidence based on combat mathematics. Air forces throughout history had been forced to abandon operations when loss rates exceeded 7 to 8%. The Americans had just lost double that rate. Their vaunted precision daylight bombing doctrine, which required deep penetrations without fighter escort, had been proven prohibitively expensive. The Fortress is a formidable aircraft, Galland continued, but formidable is not invincible. Concentrated fighter attacks with superior numbers can destroy these formations. Today proves the point. American bomber doctrine has failed. They cannot sustain losses at this level. What Galland didn't know, what no Luftwaffe commander could have anticipated, was that American response to Schweinfurt wouldn't be withdrawal or reduction. It would be overwhelming escalation. Within 5 months, the United States would return to German skies, not with hundreds of bombers suffering unsustainable losses, but with formations exceeding 1,000 heavy bombers escorted by hundreds of long-range fighters that would turn the Luftwaffe's defensive victory into its death sentence. The tactical success of August 17th would trigger an American industrial and operational response so massive that the Luftwaffe fighter force that had won at Schweinfurt would be destroyed through attrition during Big Week in February 1944. The defensive victory that seemed to validate German fighter doctrine would instead mark the beginning of the Luftwaffe's systematic destruction, buried not by tactical defeat but by American production that replaced losses faster than German fighters could inflict them while simultaneously introducing weapon systems that reversed every tactical advantage. This story is about how tactical victory became strategic catastrophe, how loss rates that should have been prohibitive proved merely temporary setbacks for American industrial capacity, and how German fighter force that believed it had won the defensive battle was instead ground down by an opponent who responded to 60 bombers lost by sending 1,000 bombers next time. The mathematics that proved American losses unsustainable were about to be overwhelmed by mathematics of American bomber production running at 16 aircraft daily, faster than German fighters could destroy them even during their most successful day. The German confidence in fighter defense capability rested on substantial combat experience and tactical success through 1943. Luftwaffe fighter forces had been refined through 3 years of warfare, developing tactics specifically for destroying heavy bomber formations. The defensive system was sophisticated. The Himmelbett line, a radar-guided fighter control network, provided early warning of incoming bomber streams. Fighter controllers directed interceptors to optimal attack positions. The fighters themselves, primarily Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, were armed with 20mm cannon and 13mm machine guns, capable of destroying heavy bombers when concentrated fire hit critical areas. Luftwaffe fighter doctrine emphasized head-on attacks against bomber formations. The tactic, developed through combat experience, maximized fighter firepower while minimizing exposure to defensive guns. A head-on pass at closing speed of 500 plus mph gave bomber gunners less than 2 seconds to track and fire accurately, while German fighters could aim at the bomber's vulnerable nose section where defensive armament was lightest. Oberst Egon Mayer, commanding Jagdgeschwader II, had perfected the head-on attack doctrine. His March 1943 report to Fighter Command documented the effectiveness. Head-on attacks from 12 o'clock high position allow our fighters to concentrate fire on bomber cockpit and engines while minimizing exposure to defensive fire. Properly executed attack destroys or cripples bombers before their gunners can respond effectively. This tactic has increased kill ratios from 1:15 to 1.6. 6 fighters can reliably destroy 1 heavy bomber. The improved kill ratios gave Luftwaffe commanders confidence that concentrated fighter defense could make American daylight bombing prohibitively expensive. The mathematics seem straightforward. American bomber formations typically numbered 200-300 aircraft. German fighter forces could concentrate 300-400 fighters against major raids. If properly deployed, these fighters could inflict 10 to 15% losses on attacking formations. Loss rates exceeding 10% were historically unsustainable. Air forces that suffered such casualties consistently were forced to abandon operations. The British had learned this during daylight bombing attempts in 1940-41. The Americans would surely learn the same lesson. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission of August 17, 1943, seemed to validate this assessment completely. The operation was ambitious: simultaneous raids on ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt and aircraft plants at Regensburg by a combined force of 376 B-17s. The dual targets would split German defenses while attacking critical industrial bottlenecks. The 4th Bombardment Wing, 146 B-17s, departed England at 0945 hours targeting Regensburg, planning to continue to North Africa after bombing, avoiding the return flight through German defenses. The 1st Bombardment Wing, 230 B-17s, would follow several hours later, targeting Schweinfurt, then return to England. The Regensburg force faced immediate fighter opposition after crossing into German airspace. Major Egon Mayer led JG-2's fighters in head-on attacks that shattered lead formations. The B-17s, lacking fighter escort beyond the German border, fought alone against waves of fighters attacking from all angles. Lieutenant Colonel Bierna Lay Jr., flying with the 100th Bombardment Group to Regensburg, described the onslaught in his after-action report. German fighters attacked in pairs and fours, making head-on passes through our formation with complete disregard for collision danger. Their 20 mm cannon fire was devastatingly accurate. I watched B-17s ahead of us explode, break apart, or drop out of formation trailing fire. The attacks continued without pause for over an hour. We counted at least 200 individual fighter attacks against our group alone. The Regensburg force lost 24 bombers, 16.4% of the attacking force, but they reached the target, bombed accurately, and escaped to North Africa, avoiding return flight through German defenses. The Schweinfurt force faced worse. Delayed takeoff due to weather meant they attacked in afternoon, giving German fighters time to refuel and rearm after engaging the Regensburg formation. JG-26, JG-2, and JG-11 concentrated against the Schweinfurt bombers with fresh ammunition and fuel. Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of Adolf Galland and commanding the 3 JG-26, led repeated attacks against the bomber stream. His combat report documented the systematic destruction. We achieved optimal positioning ahead of the bomber formation and executed 6 separate head-on attack waves. Each wave involved 12 to 16 fighters attacking simultaneously in line-abreast formation. The concentrated firepower proved overwhelming. I personally observed 8 heavy bombers destroyed during our attacks, 4 exploding from direct hits, 2 breaking apart structurally, 2 dropping from formation disabled. The Schweinfurt force lost 36 bombers over the target, and during withdrawal, 15.7% losses. Combined with Regensburg losses, 60 B-17s were destroyed in a single day, the highest American bomber loss of the war to that point. Luftwaffe claims, as always, exceeded actual losses. German fighter pilots claimed 106 heavy bombers destroyed, standard overclaiming in combat where multiple fighters attacked the same target and each claimed the kill. But even the confirmed American losses of 60 aircraft represented catastrophic casualties. General Major Josef Schmid, commanding Generalleutnant, submitted his assessment to Luftwaffe High Command on August 18th with confidence bordering on certainty. Yesterday's defensive operations prove concentrated fighter defense can inflict unsustainable casualties on American bomber formations. The enemy lost 16% of attacking force in single day. No air force can absorb such losses continuously. The American doctrine of unescorted daylight precision bombing has failed. They lack fighter escorts with range to accompany bombers to German industrial targets. Without escort, bomber formations face concentrated fighter attack that will consistently achieve 10–15% kill rates. These casualties will force Americans to abandon daylight operations or restrict attacks to targets within escort range. The victory confirms our defensive strategy. Concentrated fighter forces, properly deployed and supplied, can defeat American air offensive through attrition. The fortress may be heavily armed, but it is not invincible. Sustained losses will destroy American will to continue daylight bombing campaign. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, briefed on the Schweinfurt results, was equally confident. His August 19th statement to assembled Luftwaffe commanders declared, "The Americans have learned what we taught the British in 1940. Unescorted daylight bombers cannot survive concentrated fighter opposition. Their losses yesterday prove this. They will not return. And if they do return, we will destroy them again. The Reich's air defenses are impregnable." The German assessment seemed validated when American bomber operations paused. No major deep penetration raids occurred in the weeks following Schweinfurt. The Americans appeared to be reconsidering their strategy, exactly as German commanders predicted. But the pause wasn't reconsideration. It was preparation. In American aircraft plants, shipyards, and training bases, a response was building that would overwhelm German defenses not through tactical innovation, but through industrial mass production. The American 8th Air Force commander, Major General Ira Eaker, faced the crisis that German commanders anticipated would end daylight bombing. His August 20th cable to General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding the U.S. Army Air Forces, was blunt. Schweinfurt losses unsustainable. Current force structure cannot absorb 15% casualty rates on repeated deep penetration missions. Without long-range fighter escort, future operations against German industrial targets will result in prohibitive losses. Recommend suspension of unescorted deep penetration pending escort fighter availability. Arnold's response stunned even Allied commanders familiar with American industrial capacity. Instead of suspending operations or reducing ambitions, Arnold ordered massive escalation. Losses will be replaced. Bomber production exceeds attrition even at current rates. Long-range escort fighters entering production. Operational strength will double by January 1944. Continue operations. Accept current losses. American production will overwhelm German defenses through numerical superiority. The American industrial response to Schweinfurt was already underway before the raid even occurred. Boeing, Douglas, and Lockheed were producing B-17s and B-24s at rates exceeding German destruction capability even during their most successful days. In 1943, American aircraft plants produced 9,615 heavy bombers, 26 aircraft daily. The 60 bombers lost at Schweinfurt represented 2.3 days of production. At current German attrition rates of 10–15% per mission, the Luftwaffe would need to destroy 150–200 bombers monthly to prevent American force growth. American production was replacing those losses, plus adding 500 additional bombers monthly. Boeing's Seattle plant alone was producing 16 B-17s daily by August 1943. The Lockheed Vega plant in Burbank produced 12 B-17s daily. Douglas plants in Long Beach and Tulsa produced B-17s at combined rate of 8 daily. The production pipeline was so robust that Schweinfurt losses were replaced within 4 days. But production was only one element of American response. The critical vulnerability, lack of long-range fighter escort, was being solved through the P-51 Mustang development program. The P-51 Mustang, originally designed for British requirements in 1940, had been transformed by installing the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in place of the original Allison power plant. The Merlin-powered P-51B, entering production in June 1943, possessed performance rivaling German fighters, combined with range exceeding 1,000 miles with drop tanks. North American Aviation, producing the P-51 at Inglewood, California, ramped production from 50 aircraft monthly in mid-1943 to 200 monthly by December 1943. A second production line in Dallas added another 150 monthly. By January 1944, P-51 production exceeded 400 fighters monthly, enough to equip multiple fighter groups with aircraft capable of escorting bombers to Berlin and back. The strategic mathematics were shifting dramatically. German fighters had won at Schweinfurt by attacking unescorted bombers with concentrated force. But once long-range escorts arrived, German fighters would face dilemma: attack bombers and fight escorts, or avoid escorts and allow bombers to reach targets unmolested. Either choice would reduce effectiveness. General Arnold's strategy was systematic: destruction through overwhelming force. Instead of accepting Schweinfurt as defeat requiring operational changes, Arnold planned to return with such massive forces that German defenses would be overwhelmed through attrition, even if loss rates remained constant. The plan, formalized in December 1943 as Operation Argument, but later known as Big Week, called for maximum effort raids against German aircraft industry using combined 8th Air Force from England and 15th Air Force from Italy. The raids would employ over 1,000 heavy bombers escorted by 800-plus fighters, attacking German aircraft plants and forcing Luftwaffe fighters to defend or concede air superiority. The psychological calculation was brutal. German fighters defending factories would suffer unsustainable casualties against overwhelming American numbers. The Luftwaffe would be destroyed not through tactical defeat, but through attrition, fighting against forces that replaced losses faster than German factories could replace fighters. The transformation of American striking power between August 1943 and February 1944 occurred at pace German intelligence couldn't track. The 8th Air Force, which dispatched 376 bombers to Schweinfurt in August, would dispatch over 1,000 bombers during Big Week raids in February, a threefold increase in 5 months. Fighter escort capability increased even more dramatically. In August 1943, escort fighters could protect bombers to the German border, but not over target. By February 1944, P-51 Mustangs could escort bombers to any target in Germany and return with fuel reserves for combat. Oberst Josef Schmid, tracking American force buildup through late 1943, reported increasing concern to Fighter Command in January 1944. American bomber strength continues growing despite losses inflicted. Their replacements exceed our attrition. Intelligence indicates new long-range fighter entering service, the P-51 Mustang. This aircraft possesses range to escort bombers throughout Germany while maintaining performance equal to our fighters. The escort advantage we exploited at Schweinfurt will disappear. His warnings were dismissed by higher command, still confident from Schweinfurt's success. Goering, briefed on American buildup, responded, "Let them come with 1,000 bombers. We will destroy 150. They cannot sustain such losses. Numbers mean nothing against concentrated fighter defense." But Goering's mathematics were obsolete. American production of 26 heavy bombers daily meant 150 losses, represented less than 6 days of replacement. The Germans were fighting an enemy who could absorb losses that would destroy any other air force, because American industry replaced aircraft faster than combat destroyed them. Big Week began on February the 20th, 1944, with coordinated raids by 8th and 15th Air Forces against German aircraft plants. The first day's mission dispatched 1,028 heavy bombers, escorted by 832 fighters, the largest single aerial armada in history to that point. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland, watching the raid plots develop at Fighter Command, confronted the reality his August assessment had missed. The Americans hadn't been deterred by Schweinfurt losses. They'd returned with overwhelming force. The Luftwaffe concentrated every available fighter, approximately 450 aircraft, against the bomber stream. The resulting air battle involved over 2,300 aircraft in combat simultaneously, a scale of aerial warfare never before witnessed. German fighters achieved kills. The Americans lost 21 bombers on February 20th, 2% of attacking force. But this seemingly modest loss rate concealed catastrophic German casualties. American escort fighters, primarily P-51s and P-47s, engaged German fighters before they reached bombers. The escorts destroyed 61 German fighters while losing 4 of their own, a 15.1 kill ratio favoring the Americans. Major Georg Peter Eder, commanding the Su JG-26, survived February 20th and described the changed tactical environment in his combat report. We faced continuous fighter escort, from English coast to target and return. The American P-51 fighters possess performance equal to our best aircraft with range we cannot match. Every attempt to attack bombers required fighting through fighter screen. We lost 12 aircraft from my groupie, achieving 3 bomber kills. The exchange rate is unsustainable. The pattern repeated daily through Big Week. February 21st, 924 bombers dispatched, 19 lost, 58 German fighters destroyed. February 22nd, 799 bombers, 41 lost, 60 German fighters destroyed. February 24th, 809 bombers, 49 lost, 87 German fighters destroyed. February 25th, 1,300 bombers, combined 8th and 15th Air Forces, 64 lost, 98 German fighters destroyed. The 6-day campaign saw Americans dispatch 3,800 heavy bomber sorties, losing 226 bombers, 5.9% loss rate. German fighters were destroyed at rate of 355 confirmed, approximately 60 fighters daily. The loss mathematics had reversed completely from Schweinfurt. Americans lost bombers at sustainable rates, while replacing them faster than combat destroyed them. Germans lost fighters at rates exceeding replacement capacity, while facing bomber forces that grew continuously. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland's February 26th assessment to Göring acknowledged the transformed situation. The Americans have returned in overwhelming force with long-range fighter escort. Our defensive tactics that succeeded at Schweinfurt are inadequate against escorted formations. We achieved kills during Big Week, but suffered unsustainable fighter losses. The escort fighters, particularly the P-51 Mustang, possess range and performance neutralizing our tactical advantages. We cannot attack bombers without fighting escorts first. The escorts destroy our fighters at rates we cannot replace. American production replaces their bomber losses within days, while our fighter losses require weeks to replace. Most critically, American force continues growing despite losses. They now dispatch 1,000 bomber raids routinely. Our fighter strength declines daily. The attrition mathematics favor them completely. Without fundamental change in strategy or massive fighter production increase, the day battle is lost. Göring's response revealed the strategic blindness that would doom the Luftwaffe. Impossible. Continue maximum effort against bombers. The Americans cannot sustain current operation tempo. Their losses, while lower than Schweinfurt, still exceed acceptable rates. They will exhaust themselves. But American operational tempo didn't exhaust, it increased. March 1944 saw 8th Air Force dispatch over 21,000 bomber sorties. April saw 23,000. May exceeded 25,000. The force that German commanders expected to collapse from Schweinfurt losses instead grew exponentially. The fighter escort development proved as devastating as bomber numbers. By March 1944, The 8th Air Force operated 15 fighter groups, approximately 750 fighters, with majority being long-range P-51 Mustangs. These escorts could protect bombers anywhere in Germany while maintaining combat capability matching or exceeding German fighters. The tactical implications destroyed German fighter effectiveness. Luftwaffe fighters attempting to attack bomber formations had to engage escorts first, but the escorts were specifically positioned to intercept attacking fighters. German formations were decimated by American fighters before reaching bombers. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's highest-scoring aces with over 200 victories, described the impossible tactical situation in his April 1944 combat diary. "We are ordered to attack bombers, but to reach bombers, we must fight through escort screens. The P-51s engage us before we achieve bombing position. If we fight escorts, we exhaust fuel and ammunition before reaching bombers. If we avoid escorts to attack bombers, the escorts attack us while we engage bomber defensive fire. Every tactical option leads to losses. The Americans have solved the escort problem we believed unsolvable. Their fighters possess range to accompany bombers throughout missions while maintaining combat capability. We believed such aircraft impossible, either range or performance, not both. The P-51 possesses both. This single aircraft has neutralized our defensive advantage." The production disparity became overwhelming through 1944. American aircraft plants produced 16,334 heavy bombers during 1944, 45 daily. North American aviation alone produced 6,502 P-51 Mustangs, 18 fighters daily from a single manufacturer. German aircraft production, despite Speer's efforts to increase output, never matched American rates. Germany produced 4,936 single-engine fighters monthly at peak in 1944, impressive but insufficient against American production of 2,000 fighters monthly from multiple manufacturers simultaneously. The strategic bombing campaign that German commanders believed they defeated at Schweinfurt accelerated through 1944 to crushing conclusion. In June 1944, the 8th Air Force dispatched over 38,000 bomber sorties supporting D-Day invasion. July exceeded 40,000 sorties. The bomber forces that lost 60 aircraft at Schweinfurt now absorbed similar daily losses while continuing operations at intensifying pace. German fighters, ground down by attrition during Big Week and subsequent battles, declined from 1,200 operational fighters in February 1944 to fewer than 600 by August. Pilot quality collapsed as experienced aces died and replacements entered combat with minimal training. Fuel shortages grounded available aircraft. Industrial production couldn't replace losses. By September 1944, Luftwaffe daylight fighter operations had effectively ceased. American bomber formations flew over Germany with minimal opposition. The defensive victory at Schweinfurt, which proved German fighters could inflict heavy losses, had led directly to systematic destruction of the fighter force through attrition against opponents who replaced losses faster than they occurred. The final reckoning of the Schweinfurt Big Week sequence demonstrated how tactical victory became strategic catastrophe. German fighters proved they could destroy American bombers at rates exceeding 10% in August 1943. This victory triggered American response that destroyed the Luftwaffe fighter force completely by September 1944. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland, removed from fighter command in January 1945 for criticizing Göring's leadership, reflected on the sequence in post-war interrogation. Schweinfurt was our greatest tactical victory and our strategic death sentence. We proved we could inflict unsustainable casualties on American bombers. We believed this would force them to abandon daylight bombing. Instead, they returned with overwhelming force. The 60 bombers we destroyed in August were replaced within 3 days of production. By February, they returned with 1,000 bombers and hundreds of long-range escorts. Our fighters that won at Schweinfurt were destroyed during Big Week through attrition against numbers we couldn't match. The fundamental error was assuming Americans would respond to losses as European air forces did by reducing operations. Instead, They increased operations while accepting losses that would have destroyed any other air force. Their industrial production replaced losses faster than we inflicted them, while simultaneously producing escort fighters that neutralized our tactical advantages. We won the battle and lost the war. The high casualties we inflicted meant nothing against enemy who produced 45 bombers daily. Our victory taught them nothing except that they needed more bombers and better escorts. They provided both in overwhelming quantities. Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, whose fighter group achieved significant kills at Schweinfurt, was killed in August 1943 during a bomber interception, one of hundreds of experienced Luftwaffe pilots lost during the attrition campaign that followed their tactical victory. His brother Adolf survived the war to witness how completely the victory had failed strategically. Oberst Egon Meyer, whose head-on attack doctrine proved so effective at Schweinfurt, was killed on March 2, 1944, during a bomber interception. His 102 confirmed kills included dozens of heavy bombers, but his death exemplified how tactical excellence proved insufficient against overwhelming numbers. The American aircrew losses were substantial but sustainable. The 8th Air Force lost approximately 26,000 aircrew killed during the strategic bombing campaign, terrible casualties representing brave men who died in burning aircraft over Germany. But these losses, while tragic individually, didn't prevent campaign success because replacements arrived faster than losses occurred. American bomber crew training produced over 50,000 qualified heavy bomber crew members during 1943 and 1944. The 2,000-plus crew lost during Big Week were replaced within weeks. German fighter pilot training, conversely, collapsed under fuel shortages and instructor losses. Replacement pilots entered combat with 50 to 100 flying hours versus 200 to 300 hours for American crews. Post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey documented the production mathematics that doomed German defenses. American heavy bomber production exceeded German destruction capability by factors of 5 to 1 or greater throughout 1944. Even during periods of heaviest German defensive success, American losses were replaced within days while force structure grew continuously. The introduction of long-range escort fighters, particularly the P-51 Mustang, neutralized German tactical advantages developed through 1943. German fighters could no longer attack bombers with impunity. Every bomber interception required fighting through escort screens that destroyed German fighters at unsustainable rates. The combination of overwhelming bomber production and effective long-range escorts created strategic situation where German defensive victories became tactical irrelevancies. The Luftwaffe could destroy 100 bombers during a raid, and Americans would return next day with 1,000 more, while German fighter strength declined from combat attrition. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, interrogated at Nuremberg in 1946, confronted evidence of his catastrophic misassessment. When we destroyed 60 American bombers at Schweinfurt, I believed we had won. I declared the American daylight bombing campaign defeated. This was perhaps my greatest mistake of the war. The Americans didn't retreat. They returned with 1,000-bomber raids. They produced aircraft faster than we could destroy them. They developed escort fighters with range I believed impossible. They sustained casualties that would have broken any European air force and continued operations at increasing intensity. I underestimated American industrial capacity completely. They could absorb losses in single day that would have crippled Luftwaffe for months. They replaced 60 destroyed bombers within 3 days while preparing to send 1,000 more. This was industrial warfare at scale we couldn't comprehend or counter. The Schweinfurt victory was illusory. We won battle and thought we'd won war. Instead, we'd provoked response that destroyed us. The Americans learned they needed more bombers and better escorts. They provided both in quantities that buried us. Our tactical excellence proved worthless against their industrial supremacy. At the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, an exhibit documents the Schweinfurt Big Week sequence. A memorial plaque lists the 600 American aircrew killed during Schweinfurt missions, testament to courage and sacrifice. Adjacent displays show photographs of big weak raids with formations of 1,000 plus bombers stretching to the horizon. The exhibit's interpretive text explains the Schweinfurt raids of August and October 1943 resulted in heavy American casualties that German commanders believed would end daylight bombing. Instead, American industrial production replaced losses while developing long-range escort fighters that neutralized German defensive advantages. Big Week in February 1944 demonstrated American response to Schweinfurt, not withdrawal, but overwhelming escalation. The force that lost 60 bombers in August returned with 1,000 bombers in February, protected by hundreds of escort fighters. German tactical victory became strategic defeat as the Luftwaffe fighter force was destroyed through attrition against numbers it couldn't match. August 17, 1943. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland reviewed 60 confirmed bomber kills at Schweinfurt with confidence that American daylight bombing had been proven unsustainable. The loss rate exceeded 16%, catastrophic casualties that should have forced operational changes or withdrawal. German fighter doctrine had succeeded. The defensive battle was won. 5 months later, on February 20, 1944, Galland watched helplessly as 1,028 American bombers, escorted by 832 fighters, attacked German aircraft plants. The force that should have been defeated by Schweinfurt losses had instead tripled in size while developing escort fighters that neutralized every German tactical advantage. The 60 bombers destroyed at Schweinfurt represented less than 3 days of American production. The tactical victory that proved German fighters could inflict heavy casualties triggered American industrial response that produced bombers at 45 daily, fighters at 50 plus daily, and operational forces that grew continuously despite losses. German commanders expected Americans to respond to casualties as European air forces did, by reducing operations to sustainable levels. Instead, Americans redefined sustainability through industrial mass production that replaced losses faster than combat inflicted them, while simultaneously solving the escort problem German commanders believed unsolvable. The Reich air defense that claimed 60 B-17s shot down at Schweinfurt discovered 3 months later that Americans returned with 1,000 bombers, not because they'd learned to avoid losses, but because they'd learned to replace losses faster than German fighters could inflict them while overwhelming defenses through numerical superiority no tactical excellence could counter. The victory that should have saved Germany instead triggered the industrial avalanche that buried the Luftwaffe under production mathematics that made tactical success strategically irrelevant.